In 2006, a Swedish man named Hakan Nordkvist claimed he crawled beneath his kitchen sink to fix a leak and found something that should not have been there. A tunnel, cold and narrow, leading not into the plumbing, but into another year. According to the story, he emerged in 2042 and met an 81-year-old version of himself. The two men, young and old, stood together for a photograph. They compared tattoos. One was familiar. The other seemed to contain a strange molecular design, a pattern some believers later described as beyond anything known in the present. It is a strange place to begin a journey through time. Not with a machine, not with a laboratory, not with a great flashing portal. Just water, metal pipes, and a man kneeling on a kitchen floor. The story remains disputed, incomplete, and difficult to verify. Still, it asks a question that refuses to disappear. What if time is not a straight road, but a house with hidden doors? Tonight, we follow 10 stories where people claimed those doors opened. Some involve photographs, coins, police files, old films, ancient machines, and drawings far ahead of their age. Not all of them can be true, but each one reveals something about our hunger to believe the past and future may be closer than we think. And the first door may have opened beneath a sink. A strange object can change the feeling of an entire century. In 1928, during footage connected to Charlie Chaplin's film The Circus, a woman walks through the frame holding something to the side of her face. Her hand is raised. Her mouth moves. To modern eyes, the gesture looks familiar. A person speaking into a mobile phone. The problem is that the world of 1928 had no cell towers, no smartphones, no wireless networks tucked into invisible air. The streets still belong to hats, coats, horse-drawn memory, and the early machinery of cinema. Yet the image remains curiously modern, almost like a single frame from the future accidentally dropped into black and white film. Skeptics have offered practical explanations. The object may have been an early hearing device. The movement of her mouth may have been conversation with someone off camera. Some film specialists have noted that the footage itself appears authentic, but authenticity of the film does not prove the identity of the object. That distinction matters. A mystery does not become evidence simply because it is compelling, but compelling mysteries survive because they disturb the neatness of history. They remind us how easily a human gesture can cross decades. If a woman holding an unknown object can make us question 1928, then what happens when the object is not a small device in a film, but a complex machine pulled from the sea? It lay underwater for almost 2,000 years, corroded, broken, and nearly unreadable. The Antikythera mechanism was discovered in a shipwreck near a Greek island, a lump of bronze and gears from around the 1st century before Christ. At first, it looked like ruined metal. Then researchers began to see teeth, wheels, inscriptions, and mathematical intention. Here was a device capable of tracking celestial cycles with a sophistication that seemed wildly out of place. It could model the motions of the sun, moon, and possibly planets. It spoke the language of astronomy through bronze gears long before Europe would build similar mechanical clocks. This is not proof of time travel. It is proof that ancient intelligence was far deeper than our lazy assumptions. Still, the mechanism creates an unsettling impression. A machine that looks as if it belongs in a later chapter of human invention found in a world of scrolls, temples, and sea routes. The phrase, ahead of its time, is often used too casually. In this case, it feels almost literal. Perhaps the Antikythera mechanism does not show that a traveler came from the future. Perhaps it shows that the past itself was more advanced, more experimental, and more fragile than we remember. But then comes another figure, a man whose notebook seemed to hold not one future invention, but many. And his name still casts a long shadow across the centuries. Leonardo da Vinci's pages look less like notes and more like conversations with tomorrow. In his drawings, we find flying machines, armored vehicles, studies of water, anatomy, motion, and mechanical force. His mirror writing seems intimate and private, as if the page was a chamber where ideas could turn away from the world and still remain alive. Some have wondered whether Leonardo invented these ideas or merely received them from somewhere else. That is not a claim history can confirm. The record gives us a brilliant artist, engineer, observer, and anatomist working from intense curiosity and rare discipline. But the emotional mystery remains. How could one mind see so far? He studied the human body with a precision that seems modern. He imagined vertical flight before engines could lift metal into the sky. He drew machines that resemble tanks, centuries before armored warfare became real. In his notes on blood and fluid motion, we sense not prophecy, but extraordinary attention. Sometimes the future does not arrive from a traveler. Sometimes it appears inside a mind willing to look longer than everyone else. Leonardo's mystery is quieter than a time machine. It does not need lightning or portals. It asks whether genius itself can feel like a breach in time. And yet the stories that follow are not about inventions waiting on paper. They are about people who appeared suddenly in the wrong year. On a June night in 1950, according to one of the most persistent urban legends of time travel, a man stepped into Times Square and was struck by a car. His name was said to be Rudolph Fentz. He wore clothing from the late 19th century, but not like a costume. The fabric seemed new. His shoes, his hat, his manner, all belonged to another age. In his pockets were reportedly old currency, business cards, and tokens from places long gone, including a tavern said to have disappeared decades earlier. Investigators in the story traced his identity back to a missing person report from the 1870s, a man who had gone out for a walk and never returned. The tale is haunting because it is so ordinary. There is no machine, no prophecy, no grand design. Just a person crossing a street and finding that the world has changed around him. But the record is not simple. Researchers have argued that the Fentz story may have originated in fiction and later been mistaken for fact. That possibility does not weaken the emotional power of the legend. It sharpens it. Why do we want this story to be true? Maybe because it captures our deepest fear about time. Not that we might travel through it, but that we might be abandoned by it. And soon, the traveler would no longer be a lost man in old clothes. He would be a voice on the internet speaking from the year 2036. At the turn of the millennium, when the internet still felt like a half-lit frontier, a user calling himself John Titor began posting messages on public forums. He claimed to be a soldier from the year 2036. His mission, he said, involved retrieving an IBM 5100 computer, a machine from the 1970s with a rare technical capability. He described a time machine called the C204, spoke of world events, and offered diagrams that seemed part engineering sketch, part science fiction artifact. For many, Titor's most intriguing detail was his mention of the IBM 5100's ability to emulate older systems, a feature not widely known to the public at the time. Later, people associated with IBM acknowledged that the machine had unusual capabilities. To believers, this was the crack in the wall. To skeptics, it was obscure knowledge, not impossible knowledge. Still, John Titor changed the shape of the time travel myth. Before him, travelers appeared in alleys, old photographs, and city streets. After him, they could appear as text on a screen, anonymous and calm, typing messages from a future full of conflict and repair. The midpoint of our journey begins here, because Titor forces a different question. If time travelers existed, would they arrive with glowing machines, or would they sound like someone in a forum thread at 2 a.m.? And if a future can speak through a keyboard, perhaps the next doorway might open in the middle of an ordinary street. Bold Street in Liverpool does not look like the edge of reality. It is a shopping street, a corridor of storefronts, footsteps, buses, and ordinary weather. Yet over the years, stories have gathered there like mist. People have claimed to turn a corner and find themselves standing not in the present, but in the 1950s or 1960s. The signs change. The shop fronts become unfamiliar. The clothes on passers-by seem older. Then, just as suddenly, the present returns. One account describes a man entering a shop that should not have existed in his own time. Others speak of a strange silence, a slight distortion, a feeling that the street had slipped sideways. Some versions of the legend mention security cameras showing people reacting to obstacles the camera cannot see, as if the body had entered one layer of reality while the lens remained trapped in another. The evidentiary basis for such claims is uncertain, and the stories often circulate without clear documentation. Yet Bold Street continues to fascinate because its mystery is not grand. It is local, human, and almost practical. A person goes shopping and briefly loses the century. Maybe the city preserves memory in ways we do not understand. Maybe urban legends attach themselves to places where architecture and nostalgia overlap. But if a street can appear to fold into another decade, could a garden path do the same across centuries? In 1901, two educated women walked through the grounds of Versailles and later claimed they had stepped into the past. Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain were not careless fantasists. They were scholars, disciplined observers, women trained to notice details. During their visit, they described encountering people and landscapes that seemed strangely out of place, as if the palace grounds had momentarily returned to the world of 1789. They later believed they had seen figures connected to Marie Antoinette's final years. Their account included paths, buildings, and arrangements they said were not visible in the modern grounds, but appeared to match older royal plans and records. The story became known as the Moberly-Jourdain incident, or the Versailles time slip. Critics have suggested misperception, memory distortion, theatrical reenactments, or imaginative reconstruction. Supporters point to the precision of certain details and the character of the witnesses. What makes the Versailles account so enduring is its atmosphere. It does not feel like invasion from the future. It feels like memory leaking through a place that has absorbed too much history. Versailles was built to stage power, beauty, ritual, and illusion. Perhaps it was always a theater of time. By this point in our journey, the pattern has shifted. The question is no longer only whether individuals travel through time. It is whether certain places hold time differently. And soon, that question moves from palace gardens to military experiments. Some stories sound as if they were born from fog, electricity, and wartime fear. The Philadelphia experiment is one of them. According to accounts later associated with Carl Allen, also known as Carlos Allende, the USS Eldridge was involved in a 1943 naval experiment that attempted to make the ship invisible. The legend claims the experiment did more than bend light. It bent space, and possibly time. The most disturbing versions describe sailors trapped in metal, men fused into walls or decks, bodies caught between locations as if the ship had moved, but the flesh had not fully followed. Other tellings speak of crew members reappearing in distant places, suffering breakdowns, confusion, and unbearable disorientation. The U.S. Navy has denied that such an experiment occurred in the form described. Historians have pointed to inconsistencies, missing evidence, and the way wartime secrecy can feed rumor. The medical records and official documentation often cited in retellings remain difficult to verify. Still, the legend persists because it captures a real 20th century anxiety. When science entered the age of radar, nuclear physics, and military secrecy, ordinary people began to imagine that governments might be touching forces they could not control. Here, time travel becomes less magical and more tragic. Not adventure, but damage. And after machinery, ships, and war, we turn to a different kind of traveler. A man who claimed to leave the present, not with his body, but with his mind. Edgar Cayce did not look like a machine-age prophet. He was soft-spoken, modest, and often described as entering a sleep-like state before giving readings. From this condition, supporters believed he could diagnose illness, describe distant places, and speak of future technologies. He became known as the sleeping prophet. Some accounts credit Cayce with describing ideas that resemble later developments in communication, including devices that would connect people across distance and systems that sound to modern ears faintly like the internet or mobile technology. Interpreting such statements is difficult. Prophecy often becomes clearer only after history has already happened. There are also claims that Casey's brain activity showed unusual patterns, including references to extraordinary mental states. The scientific record around such claims is not as firm as believers sometimes suggest. What remains certain is that Case became a powerful symbol of one question: can consciousness reach beyond its own moment? This changes the definition of time travel again. Perhaps travel is not always movement of the body through years. Perhaps it can be the mind grasping something ahead of schedule, like a radio catching a signal before anyone knows the station exists. Casey's story stands between faith, psychology, and mystery. It asks whether the future is a destination or a pressure felt by sensitive minds. And that brings us back to the artifacts, the objects that seem to arrive too early, waiting for us to catch up. An old coin in a pocket can feel heavier than a machine. In many time travel stories, the smallest objects do the most emotional work. A tavern token from a vanished building, a business card with an address that no longer exists, a photograph of two versions of the same face, a film frame that refuses to look fully at home in its own decade. These objects matter because they make mystery tactile. A theory can be dismissed. A witness can be doubted. But an object asks to be held. It occupies space. It catches light. It forces the imagination to consider the possibility that time leaves debris. The difficulty is that objects can be misread, misdated, planted, misunderstood, or absorbed into legend. A photograph may show less than we think. A coin may have survived longer than expected. A device may look modern only because our eyes are trained by modern life. Still, we should not dismiss the feeling too quickly. Human beings understand time through things. Wedding rings, war medals, letters, tools, watches, toys in attic boxes. Objects teach us that the past is never entirely gone. It waits in drawers and museums, in archives and shipwrecks. Maybe time travel stories are not only about escaping the present. Maybe they are about our fear that evidence will outlive us, but never explain us completely. And if objects are unreliable witnesses, perhaps the human body is the strangest witness of all. The human body is a clock we cannot fully silence. Hair grays, skin folds, bones remember pressure. Scars mark old impacts with more honesty than memory often can. That is why time travel stories involving bodies feel so intimate. Hakan Nordkvist comparing tattoos with an older self. Rudolph Fentz standing in a modern street dressed for another century. Sailors in the Philadelphia legend losing control of their own physical boundaries. These stories unsettle us because time is not abstract inside the body. It is visible. A person meeting an older version of himself is not just confronting the future. He is confronting mortality, regret, survival, and the strange possibility that identity may continue beyond the version we know today. That is the hidden emotional engine beneath many time travel legends. We say we want proof, but often we want reassurance. We want to know whether the future exists somewhere already. We want to ask who we become. We want to discover whether our choices matter, or whether they are already written in a place we cannot reach. The science of time remains cautious. Relativity tells us time can stretch under extreme conditions, but the ordinary doorways of legend remain unconfirmed. Even so, the body keeps asking questions. Every face in an old photograph was once someone's present. And when we look long enough, history itself begins to resemble a crowd of travelers, all moving at different speeds toward the same darkness. Perhaps the most mysterious thing about time travel is not whether it happens, but why we keep needing it to. Every age imagines the past and future in its own image. The early 20th century gave us ghostly photographs and strange machines. The Cold War gave us military experiments and broken sailors. The Internet age gave us John Titor, a traveler made of text, diagrams, and forum posts. Our own age gives us viral footage, enhanced images, and endless debate about what counts as evidence. The form changes. The longing remains. We are creatures trapped between memory and anticipation. We grieve what is gone and fear what is coming. Time travel stories give shape to that tension. They let the past speak again. They let the future warn us. They let a lost man reappear, a genius seem less alone, an ancient mechanism feel like a message. This does not mean the stories are true. It means they are meaningful. Careful skepticism is not the enemy of wonder. It protects wonder from becoming careless. When we admit that the evidence is incomplete, we make room for a deeper kind of curiosity, one that does not need certainty to remain alive. The 10 cases in this journey do not form a single answer. They form a pattern of questions. And now, after sinks, streets, shipwrecks, palaces, machines, prophets, and photographs, we return to the first image. A man kneeling beneath his kitchen sink wondering where the tunnel leads. Time, in the end, may be less like a road than a room full of mirrors. In one mirror, we see Hakan Nordkvist standing beside an older self. In another, a woman in a 1928 film raises an object to her face. There is bronze from Antikythera, ink from Leonardo's notebooks, a vanished man in Times Square, an internet messenger from 2036, shoppers on Bold Street, scholars at Versailles, sailors inside a wartime legend, and Edgar Cayce speaking from the borderland of sleep. Some of these stories may be misunderstandings. Some may be fiction that found a second life as folklore. Some may contain fragments of real events surrounded by interpretation. A few may remain difficult to explain because the record is thin, damaged, or strange. But the value of a mystery is not always found in solving it. Sometimes a mystery teaches us how to look, more carefully at evidence, more humbly at history, more gently at the human need to believe that time is not an iron wall. If time could truly bend, which of these cases would feel most real? The machine from the sea? The traveler online? The street that changes decades? The photograph under the sink? The answer may reveal less about time than about us. We are finite beings living inside an immense and unfinished universe. We measure our days with clocks, but we feel them through memory, hope, and loss. And somewhere between what can be proven and what still waits to be understood, time remains what it has always been, the most familiar mystery we will never completely hold.